At 8:30 p.m. on the 11th of May 2022, Mo Wilson was dropped off at home by one of her best friends, but less than 2 hours later, she was discovered dead. The ensuing investigation uncovered a deadly love triangle and even an international manhunt. This is the tragic case of Mo Wilson. Hi guys, welcome back. Today's case is one of those which will blow your mind. The lengths that some perpetrators go to is indescribable. And it also brings into question, in my belief system, the morality of certain families surrounding predators. Let's unpack that shortly. But before we do, I just want to note that I've got my merch out. I'm wearing my nice Bang to Rights merch at the moment. So if you do fancy looking at some of the new designs as well that are online, please follow the link below. And if you fancy getting my new book, Serial Killer Next Door, I appreciate every single one of you making it a bestseller. You are amazing. It's all stories about serial killers in more short form, so each chapter covers a particular killer, and as ever, the most important thing in the book is indeed the victims, as it will always be, because that is my main interest and concern. Also, if you are on my YouTube membership or my Patreon, you'll be noticing that I'm putting out a lot of content there. So you get full-length videos every single week where I don't need to worry about whether I'm meeting the community standards on YouTube. So if you haven't signed up but you fancy having a look, well, again, you can go and have a peruse and see whether that's something that you fancy. Let's talk about today's case. And it is one that genuinely has got so many layers. So let's talk about Moriah Wilson. She was somebody who was quite incredible. I'm just going to put it out there immediately. She was called Anna Moriah Wilson when she was born, but she was known as Mo. She was born on the 18th of May, 1996 in Littlejohn, New Hampshire. She was born to her parents, Eric and Karen Wilson. She also had a brother, Matthew Wilson. They're a close family. They're individuals who connect very effectively. They had a very functional relationship throughout their lives together. She grew up in Kirby, Vermont. Now that's a very small town. It's got around 575 people. So people are going to know one another. They're going to care for one another. They're going to feel part of a community. And it was a safe environment to grow up in. Now in 2014, Mo actually graduated from Burke Mountain Academy. Now this is actually a private school and it trains alpine ski athletes. So you're automatically aware in what I've just said that Mo is somebody who's got great athletic prowess. She's gifted athletically and she was so good at skiing that she actually became a nationally ranked junior skier. So you're talking about somebody who's passionate, somebody who's skilled and talented, somebody who's bright, and also somebody who's got that foundation of support from her family. So a life of thriving with potential opportunities that are going to be thrown at her in the future because she is such a skilled individual. We get to 2019. She actually at this point graduates from Dartmouth College and she actually got a bachelor degree in engineering. So again, she's not just brilliant on the slopes, she's academically incredibly bright as well, and she's gorgeous to look at. So when somebody is presented with all those opportunities in life, some that you achieve yourself, some that you're just gifted with by Mother Nature, you really do have everything to play for. And that's what we're talking about in this case. Mo was somebody who had the world at her feet. And indeed, that world should have unfolded in the most positive of fashions. And of course, I wouldn't be telling that story here if that actually had come to pass. We're here for a completely different reason and an unfortunate reason and disastrous one where Mo is concerned. She was said, aside from her obvious love of skiing, where she'd excelled on every level, to have had a real passion for cycling. So despite the achievements that she'd made in skiing, she decided that she wanted to try a new sport, and that was gravel cycling. Now, when I actually read in the research gravel cycling, I was like, that just reminds me of being 10 years old and falling off my bike on gravel. I have definitely done gravel cycling. It involves falling off your bike, going down the road at a pace, and removing the skin from your legs. That was kind of what came across my mind. But apparently that's not what gravel cycling is. So it's basically a cross between mountain and road biking. So I guess you get the best of both worlds, and also you get the challenges of both worlds, because understandably, mountain biking is hardcore. You're going up massive hills, steep inclines and declines. It's quite dangerous on that level. And then road biking, wow, it's fast. It really is fast and furious. And we all know that sometimes bikes and cars don't get on too well. But she obviously has a real desire for adrenaline, and this is something that fulfills that need. And she's awesome. So even though this is relatively new to her, within 3 years, Mo became one of the best gravel cyclists in the world. And so she starts to pursue that as a professional career, which must be absolutely amazing. I mean, if you're in a scenario where you can truly make money from your passion, where you can get sponsorship and go ahead and do something that you are absolutely brilliant at, that's living the dream. That's that quote of, when you do a job you love, you never work a day in your life. That's absolutely how it must have been for her. And she was actually interviewed by Pure Gravel in 2021. That's after she'd finished in the top 10 at Unbound. And Unbound is actually the #1 of the most popular gravel races in the US. It takes place every year, apparently, in Kansas. So people are really interested in her. They're interested in her talent. They're interested in the fact that she's pretty new to the sport and that she is just getting to the top. And that's how it should carry on. She should just be doing all these interviews ad infinitum until she decides to move on into a different area of excelling in her life. But that's all going to crash down on the 11th of May 2022. So she spent the day with a guy called Colin Strickland. Now, he is a fellow pro gravel cyclist, so they've clearly got a common interest. Now, in 2020, Colin Strickland was actually considered to be the USA's fastest man on a gravel bike. And she and Colin Strickland actually briefly dated in October 2021. It hadn't worked out, but they had remained close friends. And ultimately, it makes perfect sense. In relationships, compatibility is a massive part of that, and common interests and values and goals absolutely cement relationships. So you can imagine that when they first got together, they were thinking, well, this is going to be a great fit because we love doing the same things, but ultimately it didn't work out. But again, the very fact that they stayed friends or in contact after that breakup, it demonstrates a level of emotional maturity that you can still be nice to one another, even though you've actually been intimate and things went wrong. Equally, somebody can look in and say, well, maybe that's because there's some unfinished business. Maybe they broke up because it wasn't working perfectly, but that doesn't mean that they're not still attracted to one another, or considering that at a later date there is a possibility or potential for them to get back together. That could also be a reason why they stayed in touch. And they saw each other, so they went out with each other and did things together. They went swimming together, and on that day, they actually went swimming at Deep Eddy Pool. That's the oldest public swimming pool in Texas. And then they went off for dinner together. So they had a really nice day. And that could also be construed by some people, I suppose, as being quite an intimate scenario. Going swimming and going out for a nice meal. Others will look in and say, well, hey, no, it's perfectly normal for men and women to have great relationships that are involved in situations which don't have intimacy connected, but others will feel differently. So after they've hung out together, Colin drops Mo off at her friend Kaitlin Cash's house. This is around 8:30 p.m. that evening. He actually drove away. He didn't go inside. But then at 10 p.m., so just 2 hours after Colin has dropped Mo off at that address, Kaitlin comes in and finds Mo on the bathroom floor. And it's very clear to her, just from looking at what she is seeing in front of her eyes, that Mo has been shot, and she's been shot multiple times. So immediately she calls the police. She can't quite believe or compute what has happened. This is her friend. This is her home. How has this played out? Who on earth wants to kill Mo? She's not an individual who has gang affiliation. She's not involved in drugs. She doesn't have enemies as far as anybody is concerned. So how the hell has she been found dead in that property? And it's not as if things have been stolen. It doesn't look like some kind of intrusion gone wrong. It looks like a cold-blooded execution. Austin police arrive. They attend the scene, and they're there literally minutes later. But unfortunately, even though they tried, Mo was pronounced dead at the scene. I mean, she had succumbed to many gunshot wounds, and she had been there for a period of time. And we have to remember, that's the experience of Mo's last moments. Being executed. Just walking in, probably going about her business in the house, not having any idea that somebody wanted her dead. And then dealing with the ultimate shock of realizing that she's been attacked. And then knowing even if that's just for a moment, that everything she thought her life was going to be is being stolen from her. That's how Mo died. One of the things that police noted immediately was that Mo actually had an exit wound on her back. They also found a bullet and chipped tile beneath the body. They also found shell casings labelled 9mm JAG in the room. When her body was taken for an autopsy, obviously they knew immediately that this was a homicide. She hadn't done this to herself, but they wanted to figure out what had actually killed her. So on the 12th of May, Travis County Medical Examiner actually did that autopsy on Mo's body, and they did indeed come to the conclusion that her cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds, and the manner of death was indeed homicide. She'd actually sustained gunshot wounds to her head, her heart, and her hands. Now, immediately, when you think about hands, you're assuming that somebody's defending themselves, they're trying to block the shots. The person who did the autopsy said that those occurred after she was already lying supine on the floor. So essentially, she was down. She knew that that person was coming for her. And I always try to connect psychologically with the victim in these moments. Where were they? What were their thoughts? What were their feelings? And I know that it wouldn't be a long, protracted, drawn out amount of time that they had to figure out what was playing out. But there is this amazing capacity of the brain to send a million thoughts in one moment. We all have been there. You know, an instant can pass and you've had so many different ideas in that instant in your head, that even though she will have been absolutely traumatized and shocked, she will have had the capacity to think somebody is trying to kill me. She'll be looking in the direction of her killer's eyes and thinking, oh my God, how do I stop this? And those hands going up as she's lay without any capacity to defend herself. That's what happened to her in those final moments. She also was said to have had lacerations under her right finger and also under her chin. So now let's talk about the person who's going to become the suspect. So Kaitlin Armstrong. Now, Kaitlin Armstrong, and just to be clear, we have two Kaitlins in this case. We have Kaitlin Cash, who is her friend who found Mo's body. And then we have Kaitlin Armstrong, who is the person that we're going to be looking at as a suspect. One is a K, which is Kaitlin Armstrong, and the other is a C, but for this case, I'm obviously going to refer to Armstrong from now on instead of Kaitlin because of the fact that we have two playing out in this particular video. So she was born on the 21st of November 1987. She grew up in Livonia, Michigan. In 2005, she graduated from Stevenson High School, and then she attended Schoolcraft College and Eastern Michigan University. She was somebody who had good relationships with her family members. I would say she was somebody who was considered quite friendly and nice by most people who knew her. She was an individual who was considered a decent human being who was applying herself to society, paying her taxes, getting on with the world, and being relatively skilled in what she did. She was described as a 35-year-old yoga teacher and also a real estate agent who at the time of Mo's murder was living in Austin, Texas. Now, she also owned a business with Colin Strickland, and she'd also lived with him on and off, and that relationship was one that she was engaged in at the time of Mo's death. So that's awkward because understandably she's in a situation where her boyfriend is also spending time with Mo, somebody that he's been intimate with before, and we can all agree that can be challenging on an emotional level. I get it. There are a lot of people out there who think to themselves, listen, I've got ex-partners, I'm really good friends with them. My partner now doesn't feel threatened or intimidated by it, and that is great. But it's also relatively rare when we look at how people feel when relationships have ended. We tend to like to apply a level of distance when we have a partner and they have an ex. If you've got kids together with your ex, you have relational experience with them that's hopefully good as co-parents, but you're not necessarily going off and having meals out with them because that feels a little bit like it's excluding the current partner, and that can be very abandoning for the individual that you are with. So I do fully understand if Armstrong did have some issues with Colin hanging out with Mo, because that can be upsetting if you feel that there might be some unfinished business or some intimacy that's been experienced with them prior to you being in a relationship with that person. Now, it doesn't take long for the police to realise that they think they know who has carried out the killing, and it is indeed Armstrong. It took less than 24 hours, in fact, after Mo was found dead, that officers from the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force, You know what? It's unusual that I stop at points like this, but can we just listen to that name again? The Lone Star Fugitive Task Force. Is it me, or do you also feel like that could come out of like Star Trek? The Lone Star Fugitives Task Force. I would never wish to be arrested, but if you have to be arrested, that does sound like a pretty cool team to be arrested by. But they immediately, essentially, arrest Armstrong. They'd actually already named her as a person of interest, and the reason for that was that there'd been video surveillance footage which showed her black Jeep Grand Cherokee arriving at Kaitlin Cash's residence moments before the killing. So automatically, if the police are looking at this and they see that a woman who's involved with a man who is also involved with another woman who's actually in the house, and there could be some, I don't know, bad blood between them, and this person who was in the house at the time is now dead, ultimately they're going to be looking in your direction. Why else would she be there? There's actually no reason for this woman to actually be at that residence. Now, when she is actually arrested, it isn't on a murder charge. They obviously feel they've got their girl, but they arrive to arrest her on an outstanding misdemeanor warrant for theft. Now, the very fact that she has a misdemeanor warrant out for theft concerns me. When you think about the average human being, we don't have misdemeanors out for theft. We don't have criminal records on the whole. Most of us are just going about our business, legally living our lives, you know? We're not the kind of human beings that the police are chasing. And so that plays into a psyche that clearly doesn't have typical action associated with it. I know it might not be a serious charge when it comes down to theft, but the point is most of us, like I said, we live our lives without having any legal ramifications play out in this way because we don't act criminally. She actually then, during that situation, made no statement to the police, because one of the things that they confront her with is CCTV footage of her Jeep. Now, the reality is that no matter who you are as a criminal, for the most part, criminals aren't big planners. Some are. You get this rare minority of individuals who really thought it out, but those highly organised people are rare in the criminal world. That's why prisons are full, let's be honest. In the UK, prisons are so full that they're letting out really violent prisoners so that they can fill the prisons with less violent prisoners. That's literally happening right now in the UK. But nonetheless, even though that makes no sense, what I'm saying is prisons are full because people aren't very good at committing crimes and getting away with it, right? So even though she has potentially committed a crime, it feels like, even though she's bright, and I will make it clear now, she's quite a clever person because of the actions that we'll talk about down the line. But in that moment, it feels like if she's carried out a crime, she hasn't been thinking about the consequences of, for example, parking the car that she owns outside the property where a murder victim has lost their life. Because automatically, they're going to look in your direction. The fact that she makes no comment, even though I think that makes you look guilty as hell. Can we all just be clear about that? I do appreciate there'll be lawyers listening to this now because you get in contact with me and you're always lovely and you give me lots of advice and I'm always really interested to hear your thoughts. But a lot of you say to me, listen, if that's my client, I'll say, just say no comment, because until I get there or until I've had time to talk to you, I don't want you saying anything that could come back to haunt you. So I get it. Equally, I think when juries find out that somebody has said no comment constantly, has refused to speak, you just can't help thinking, well, they're definitely guilty, aren't they? And even if a case is brought to court where it's clear that that person has got evidence as to why they're innocent, the jury is still going on loop in the head. They're obviously guilty, they're obviously guilty, they're obviously guilty, they're obviously guilty. And like I said, you have to really work hard to get away from that mindset when you're presenting a case where somebody has given no comment and the jury might have that bias. It's a big job for a lawyer to get them to pedal back on those thoughts and feelings. So like I said, she goes with this idea of saying nothing. And one of the things that investigators struggled with was, bear in mind, we are dealing at this moment in time with a young woman. Mo is a young woman and she has had her life horrifically stolen from her. So if you are being interviewed, albeit let's say you're being interviewed inaccurately for a crime that you have not committed, even though that might be very affronting, you might feel angry, you might want to tell those officers what to do with their apparent evidence and where to shove it, The point is, if they're talking in the context of this young woman being murdered, the last thing you're going to do is be, shall we say, trite about the situation or dismissive or act as if it's not really something that concerns you. You're going to be deeply upset that this person's lost their life and deeply upset that you're being potentially accused for it or at least put in the frame. So psychologically, you may be angry with the police, but equally on an emotional level, you'll be like, I cannot believe you think I would do this. This is terrible. This is a horrific thing to happen to this woman. This is awful. But instead, when they're questioning her about these things, she turned her head, rolled her eyes in an angry manner when she's basically questioned, particularly when she's questioned about Mo's relationship with Colin Strickland. So they are bringing up the fact, look, we know your boyfriend has got this kind of relationship to some degree with this woman called Mo, who's now a murder victim. What are your thoughts on that? And she's antagonized by that scenario. She doesn't want to be questioned on it. Now, I think, like I said, that on an emotional level and a psychological level, that reaction is off. Because, for example, if you don't think there is an issue between Mo and Strickland, then you could equally say, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no way that Colin Strickland would cheat on me. Or if you think there was something, you could say, yeah, it's been really hurtful that Colin Strickland has been involved with a relationship with Mo. I trusted him. But to just roll your eyes and be like dismissive, it just feels like an inaccurate and inappropriate response to such a devastating situation that they are questioning her about. Now, Armstrong is actually released. So she gets released from custody. Now, this is on a technicality. So basically, there were apparent discrepancies between her date of birth in the police department's database and also the date noted in her warrant. However, I will say that when an officer involved in this case was actually questioned about that at a later date, he said that's not true, that they wanted to release her to see whether she would put herself into incriminating circumstances and situations. They wanted to kind of figure out where she was going, what she was thinking, and so on and so forth. I cannot say whether that's the absolute facts or otherwise. What I do know is irrelevant to that, she was allowed to leave. She wasn't kept in prison. And I think when we're dealing with somebody who might be responsible for a cold-blooded execution of a completely innocent young woman, then we probably shouldn't have her walking the streets. Just going to throw it out there. I don't like the idea of people who just go gung-ho with guns and murder people who absolutely should not in any way, shape or form have ever had a hair on their head harmed. But this is what happened. We get to the 13th of May and let's just say Armstrong isn't going back to her home thinking, you know what, I just need to sit this out. I'm totally innocent. Done nothing wrong. It'll all get worked out in time. All I need to do is carry on being the law-abiding citizen, well, apart from that theft charge, that I've always been. That's not what she does. And you know what I was saying about the no comment makes her look a little bit on the guilty side? What I'm going to tell you now, let's just say, if we were in a scenario in the world where, I don't know, our bad deeds or our guilt were illuminated in a big neon sign above our heads when we did things that were, you know, not appropriate. Like, for example, consider the Pinocchio effect. You know, you tell a lie, your nose just grows. Life would be a lot easier if those things actually happened. But if that were the case, she would have a very long nose or a massive sign above her head in neon. I'm talking a really big sign, the sign size you get over, I don't know, a massive car dealership, that kind of level. It would just say, guilty as hell. Because Armstrong, on the 13th of May, sells her Jeep, that very Jeep that's, I don't know, suspiciously been seen on CCTV. Yeah, she thinks, you know what? This car, I don't need it anymore. I don't want it anymore. I'm just going to sell it to a CarMax dealership in South Austin. She got $12,200 for it. So the first thing she's done when she's been allowed to go home is to get rid of the incriminating car. Now, she was actually given a check by that dealership just one day after being questioned by police. So when she's been questioned by police, she might have been rolling her eyes, she might have been huffing and puffing, but she was obviously simultaneously planning. And boy, does this woman plan. Because on the 14th of May, she boards a flight from Austin International Bergstrom Airport. That's early in the afternoon. The flight actually went to Houston Hobby Airport. Then she gets a connecting flight to LaGuardia Airport in New York. So this is somebody who has literally huffed it from the police station, gone straight to a car dealership, got the readies in cash form, and is now fleeing. It's as simple as that. Now, at the same time that this is all playing out, Austin Police Department said in a news release that the shooting did not appear to be a random act. So they're telling the public, look, this was something that was clearly directed at Mo. This isn't one of those shootings that's occurred accidentally. It's not a gone wrong home invasion. This is targeted as an attack. So they're saying we know who has done this, basically. But Armstrong doesn't care because she's been on a plane. Now, they do have Mo's phone, because obviously she's the victim. They want to look at her last movements. They want to know if there's any incriminating information regarding people potentially threatening her, somebody who had something against her. So they're looking at Mo's phone and going through it digitally. And they're able to gather from the information they get there that she is still romantically involved with Colin Strickland. Now, bear in mind, he is in a relationship with Armstrong. So he's doing something wrong there. There is no doubt that he should not be doing what he's doing. If you are in a monogamous relationship as far as the person you are with is concerned and you are playing away, that is on you. I actually blame him far more than Mo. If Mo is a free agent and she's interested in a guy, if he's in a relationship, it's his relationship that is the issue, and that's his area and territory to work on. He should be the one being honest with Armstrong. Mo, she can do what she wants. And I also know that some of you will say, well, no, Mo should not have gone near Colin Strickland if he was in a relationship with Armstrong. But like I said, for me, it's the man in the relationship that bears more responsibility. He has that romantic relationship, whereas Mo is a free agent. Now, Colin Strickland originally just went for the, well, I don't even know Mo. And that blows my mind. Honestly, it really does. This guy has been romantically involved with Mo. Secondly, he's actually done sports with her. Thirdly, they'd spent the day together, the day that she died. And yet he has so little respect for that woman, so little respect from somebody that he's actually been intimately related to, that he just denies having any kind of connection with her. So in his first interview, that's what he does. He just lies. And that says something about him as well, doesn't it? Because he's happy to lie to investigators. And most of us, if we're decent human beings, that's the last thing we would do. Most of us, even when we want to protect people, if we're in a situation with law enforcement dealing with something so serious, we just tell the truth because, what's wrong with telling the truth? Surely the truth is going to set you free, as the saying goes, because you've got nothing to hide. But no, he just absolutely denies knowing Mo. And I find that just deeply troubling. I mean, eventually he has to admit that he was in a relationship with her. He has to admit he was communicating with her, and he has to admit that he was doing that deceptively behind his girlfriend's back. But like I said, it's the ultimate willingness to just throw Mo under the bus as a human being, to say, oh, she's nobody, no, I don't know her. And this is in light of this poor woman just losing her life, and potentially, as Colin Strickland will be aware, losing her life because he was seeing her. Now, we can agree, no one has a right to take the life of anyone because that person is playing away with their boyfriend or girlfriend. That goes without saying. But if that boyfriend or girlfriend was not seeing another party behind the person they're meant to love or like's back, those feelings would never have arrived. So if Colin Strickland had just, I don't know, acted like a decent human being in a relationship, we wouldn't even be covering this case today. And the fact that he continued to deny Mo, that is deeply disappointing. And I hope that weighs heavy on his conscience, I don't know, for the rest of his life and eternity and beyond. It's as simple as that. So when now he's confronted with all this information, Colin Strickland admits that he did indeed delete messages from Mo on his phone, and he had her saved under a different name, Christine Wall. So he didn't even want anybody to be aware of their relationship or contact per se. Now it turns out, as it does in so many infidelity situations, that Armstrong wasn't stupid. She was aware that things were going on between Mo and Colin Strickland. And she apparently, when she became aware of this relationship, had started to express shall we say, negative thoughts and feelings towards Mo. In fact, she'd actually told people that she would hurt her. She'd said that she was going to do something bad if things carried on, and people weren't taking it seriously. But the language she was using involved violence. It also turned out that she'd recently purchased a firearm, and she told people that she'd actually managed to do that, and to other people she was saying she was going to buy a firearm. But there was definitely a planning there to go ahead and make sure that she had a weapon. Colin Strickland then revealed he'd actually bought 2 handguns for Armstrong and himself. So if this woman is talking about all these negative feelings and then he just goes out and buys her a weapon, again, I feel there's a level of responsibility on his shoulders. Now, they got a search warrant, and when they got the search warrant, the police recovered both of those guns from the house that Colin Strickland shared with Armstrong. They also found that a shell casing from one of the guns, which is a Sig Sauer P365, which belonged to Armstrong, yielded a significant match with one that was found in the crime scene. So now there's a significant match with a bullet, and her car was there, and I don't know, she's fleeing the country. They do feel, I don't know, pretty incriminating, don't they? The search warrant also revealed that Armstrong had literally visited a shooting range with her sister, Christine Armstrong, to, quote, learn how to use a firearm. Now, that could be innocent. In America, a lot of people like to know how to shoot a gun. I've never killed anything in my life. I never intend to kill anything in my life unless somebody does something really diabolical to my children, and then that may change. But with respect, if I was in America and I could go to a shooting range and fire a gun and learn how to do things like that, I probably would do, because I just think it's interesting and it's a skill that I'd like to have. So I know a lot of people do that without any sinister intent whatsoever. But when you add these things up together, it does seem a little bit suspicious. Now we get to the 17th of May. At this point, an arrest warrant for first-degree murder is issued for Kaitlin Armstrong. They believe they've got a really strong case against her. But of course, we have a little bit of a problem, don't we? Because as all this has been being put together, as they've been telling the public, well, you know what, we think this is a targeted attack. As they've been dealing with the phone issues with Strickland and discussing the fact that he's pretended that he didn't know Mo, but it turns out that he did. And now they've realised that this really could be an issue of a crime of passion and a love triangle. They've realised we do have sufficient evidence to actually go ahead and to bring Armstrong in. But of course, she knows all that. So on the 18th of May, Armstrong was actually seen at Newark Liberty International Airport. And according to US Marshals, that was because even though she's not recorded as getting on a plane, she was clearly intending to. So she's seen there, but when they look at the reservations, they find that there were no reservations made under her name. So the marshals searched the outbound flights at the airport, and there is literally no one matching that name. So this is a problem. She was definitely there. They've got images of her there, but then it doesn't look like she actually got on a plane. So how do you follow somebody that genuinely seems to have vanished into thin air? And from there, police start to find it really difficult to even track down any of Armstrong's movements after that sighting at the airport. But what does that tell us about Armstrong? She's acting so guilty that, I don't know, if you were sent a pamphlet to your home on how to spot a guilty person, they'd just have her face on the front of it, just her face. That's the guilty person. And the fact that she has thought out getting away from the reality of her actions, the fact that she has no intention, clearly, of being brought to justice for what she absolutely has to have done, because this is not the actions of somebody who's innocent, that speaks volumes about her nature. No guilt, no conscience, no desire to actually take responsibility or accountability for what she's done. And bear in mind, my God, with rare human beings who fit this kind of fractured personality, they are a danger always. Because they can just act like a completely typical human being on the whole. They can hide that callous nature. But if somebody crosses them, then you better be ready. And in this case, somebody who she feels crossed her deserved to be killed. And that means anybody who slights this woman has a potential of dealing with the wrath that Mo suffered. So she is a danger walking any street. We get to June 2022, so this is 1 month after she disappeared. Deputy US Marshal Damian Fernandez and Emir Perez, they actually travelled to Costa Rica. And basically this is because officers have received a tip that Armstrong might be living in Santa Teresa, which is a small beach town. It's about 93 miles outside the country's capital, San Jose. Now, the reason that she's managed to get away with just disappearing is that Armstrong had very cleverly and in a very manipulative way used her sister's passport to fly there. At this point, she'd assumed several fake identities. She even underwent plastic surgery. So this girl, I don't know, has watched quite a lot of mafia movies, I'd imagine, because we're talking about what villains do, aren't we? We're talking about the top tier ranking type of villain action. You know, it's not enough to flee. It's not enough to get fake identities. I'm going to go whole hog. I'm just going to change the way I look entirely. Now, we've seen this play out in other murders. This has happened, but it's rare. And why is it rare? Well, usually it's pretty expensive to do what I've just said. You know, changing your identity and changing your face, for example. It costs quite a lot of cash. And also it can be dangerous because the people doing it might be aware that you're doing this for a particular reason, and that can mean that the police and authorities are told about you. So there are all these reasons why people don't go that far. But this woman, she is intent. She is not going to go down without a fight. In fact, she's not going to go down looking like the woman that she actually is. She's going to have a whole new head. So she's had plastic surgery, she's got these fake IDs, and she's imagining now that she can just carry on with her life as a whole different human being. So investigators haven't found her at this point. They now know that they're dealing with a whole heap of other issues that could cause them problems, and they're clearly thinking, how the hell are we going to bring her in? Another thing that kind of bothers me about this case is, did she steal her sister's passport? She might have, but is it something that was willingly handed to her? I genuinely mean that. Did she get on those planes because she knew that she needed to essentially get ID that would get her elsewhere? And that was handed over willingly. And if that's the case, that says something about the people who should have been bringing her to justice in her family as opposed to supporting her escape. Now, investigators thought, what are we going to do? How are we going to get this woman to make some kind of contact with somebody, anyone, that is going to mean that we can arrest her, that we can take her back? So they actually start to enlist a female operative, and they get her to take local yoga classes. So they get an undercover agent, basically, and they think, get her going to these classes. Maybe this woman has started to do groups because she's going to probably need to bring some income in, and she's very schooled in that way. But this operative goes to local yoga lessons, and there is literally no sign of Armstrong. But I can imagine that if you are Armstrong, the last thing you're going to want is lots of people seeing you, because people watch the news, people are interested in true crime, people genuinely are brilliant armchair detectives. And the consequence of that is, if you have lots of people in front of you doing a class, then they might recognize you. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that Armstrong isn't out there doing some kind of fake name yoga teacher big group activity, because that could bring her problems. And she wants to get away with this, remember. This is not somebody who wants to go to prison. Now, after all of this intensive searching, the marshals said they just kept hitting dead ends. They were going for it, they were putting money into it, they were getting operatives on it, but it just was not reaping the rewards that they wished to reap. Now, in a last-ditch attempt, Perez, the detective involved in this case, thought to themselves, okay, yoga for me feels like it's a way of catching her, because clearly that's her skill base. But maybe what we need to think about this is on a micro level. Maybe she isn't going to want to run those groups, but maybe she'd be happy doing some one-to-one teaching. Maybe that's the way of reeling her in. So Perez decided to post an advertisement looking for a yoga teacher on Facebook. So put it out there that we're going to put out this ad or multiple ads for a yoga instructor, just see what happens from there. Now, they didn't get any responses for a week. But then Armstrong, or at least the detective believed it was Armstrong, did indeed reach out to the ad and said, yeah, I'm interested. So on the 29th of June, you can imagine how the detective would feel at this moment in time. It's like, wow, this may be our girl. We may have caught this criminal. Perez dresses up as a tourist, fully does it, dons the outfit to make them seem like they are absolutely, totally innocent of being anything involved with an investigation and just a classic tourist wanting some yoga lessons. And he goes and meets Armstrong at a local hostel. And they said, I just wanted to get close enough to tell if it was her. Now, the first thing they noticed was that Armstrong's face was swollen and she actually had a bandage on her nose. Also, her hair appeared darker, but even though he was looking at somebody who didn't quite match the description of the person who'd fled the United States, it was her. He was absolutely confident. I have found Kaitlin Armstrong. He must have felt such a victory in that moment that he had outsmarted the very person who thought that she was superior and greater than those detectives trying to bring her to justice, that he had managed to make her recognise that she was not smart at all and that she could spend time relenting at leisure over the failure that she had to believe that she was somebody that could actually escape the authorities. Now, it is worth noting that she did manage to spend 43 days on the run. So, you know, she was going for it. And just think about what she'd done in that time. She'd had her face operated on. She'd had fake IDs. She'd even started to create a whole new life for herself. This was not someone that had intended to go down easily at all. But because of that reaching out to the yoga scenario, she ends up getting arrested on the 29th of June 2022. On the 21st of July 2022, this is when Armstrong's arraigned, she pleads not guilty. Not guilty. She just says, I wasn't guilty. I'm not guilty to the murder charge. I mean, I don't even know where to go with this, but okay. Let's just carry on down this route where she believes that somehow, after everything I have just told you, that a jury is going to be like, she just seems like such a nice girl. She does seem like such a nice girl. She's got great hair. She does. She has great hair. And I like her nose. I do like her nose. I'm not necessarily convinced that that was her nose, but I like it. Yeah, she does yoga. And I think that we can all agree that yogas are like so cool. They are so cool. They're very limber. They are very limber. I have a yogi that can literally take her legs and twist them 9 times around her entire body and then wear her toes as earrings. That's how flexible she is. I have a yogi who literally doesn't walk. She just floats and slides everywhere. That's how limber my yogi is. Anyway, I don't quite know where I went with that. But what I'm saying is, no matter how nice she could come across or how great she's at yoga, I'm not sure any jury looking at the actions I've outlined so far are going to be like, yeah, she's innocent. Like, no one on this planet is going to agree with that, are they? But she is. She's like, I'm totally not guilty. She was at this point held on a $3.5 million bond at Travis County Jail. Now, one of the things that Armstrong tried to do was to suppress some evidence. And the reason that she wanted to suppress that evidence was because of the custodial interrogation with the Austin Police Department. So she didn't like, clearly, the things that came across in that interview. Now, the reason that she didn't want that was obviously because it's going to make her look a certain way, but also she said they were illegally obtained because she was not given Miranda warning. Now, a federal charge of unlawful flight to avoid prosecution was dismissed, because legal experts said that was routine, because Armstrong had a right to a speedy trial. But obviously, she did flee to avoid prosecution. That goes without saying. That's why she got on a plane, but that was agreed. Now, that evidence, by the way, wasn't suppressed. She was unsuccessful in doing that. The trial date ended up getting set for the 30th of October, 2023. And we should just be talking about that, shouldn't we, at this moment? I should be going, and this is what happened. But no! Because a little bit more drama occurred. 12th of October, 2023, Armstrong was like, well, I could go ahead and have this case and try and figure out whether they're going to believe him innocent, or I could try to escape. I kid you not. Armstrong literally escaped from officers who'd escorted her to a medical appointment outside of the jail. Now, don't get me wrong, she obviously wasn't quite as fast a runner as she believed because she was reapprehended. But this woman was not in any any sense ready to go to prison and face these charges. Absolutely under no circumstances. She was off. We are talking about such an antisocial personality here, aren't we? We are talking about narcissism of the highest degree. We're talking about a person who knows she's banged to rights and recognises that she ain't going nowhere. She ain't going nowhere. She's not going home ever again. And she's like, you know, I could accept that. Or I could just chance it in court and hope that they all think I'm actually really nice. Or I could just leg it after creating some kind of ruse about a medical issue. But that's what she did. She actually was charged at this point with escape causing bodily injury. The charges were later dropped. But let's be honest, the charges will have been dropped because, let's throw it out there, she's charged with much more serious issues that will receive much longer sentences, which will mean that it's probably not worth even charging him with those concerns. But this is absolutely worth mentioning because that talks about the psychological makeup of somebody like Armstrong. She is absolutely the highest level of narcissist that you could potentially ever have a fear of meeting. Now, when it comes down to the trial, the opening statements began on the 30th of October 2023. So the prosecution presented their opening statements first, and it was Ricky Jones who led that, and he began commenting on just how amazing Mo was, her athletic accomplishments. Then they go on to say that on May the 11th, 2022 at 9:15 p.m. here in Austin, Texas, the last thing Mo did on this earth was scream in terror. So powerful and absolutely correct. Now, the defence, Jeffrey Puryear, who I would say had a bit of a hill to climb. Jeffrey, I don't know whether you're fit or healthy, but I think you've got a bit of a mountain in front of you, and I'm imagining you're climbing that mountain in backless slippers with, I don't know, a pair of very thin gloves and shorts and a t-shirt on. That's the kind of level we're dealing with here when you think about the mountain he's got to climb. Now, he honed in on circumstantial evidence. Now, I get this bit. If all the things I've talked about that this woman did after she was suspected of the murder, if she had not done all the things I've outlined so far and had just stayed in the local area waiting to exonerate herself from these charges, we could all be like, yes, Jeffrey, I agree. It's quite circumstantial. We don't have any direct evidence that she definitely went ahead and killed Mo. He says, you did not hear any direct evidence that Kaitlin Armstrong is responsible for this crime because there isn't any. I mean, okay, Jeffrey, okay, let's carry on with this. So there isn't any evidence. No, there's no evidence. Okay, carry on. Told the jury they would hear weird things that were happening to Armstrong that would cause a person to fear for their safety. Sorry? Yeah. There are some weird things happening to Armstrong that'll make her afraid. Sorry, what are they? Just weird. They're weird things. And what will these weird things make her do? Well, you might find this weird, but what I'm saying is there were weird things going on that made Armstrong think I probably need to take on a different identity, several different identities, and have a nose job, and probably some other facial surgery, and change my hair. What weird things? Weird, just weird things. She was worried, she was scared. About the mafia? No. About other dark forces than the mafia, but just dark forces. Are you saying that your defence is that we didn't actually see her kill Mo? That's absolutely true. That's true. You didn't. So, circumstantial. And then we're to believe that just coincidentally, at the very moment where this poor woman is murdered, and your client, Armstrong, goes off because she, although under suspicion for this potential murder, has all these other things going on, which means that she needs to change her identity, totally change her face, completely change her life, and escape from the police. Yeah, totally circumstantial. I know that you don't believe what you're saying. That's how I feel. I don't know whether you feel that way, but it's ludicrous. Anyway, 40 witnesses and more were actually called to testify in Armstrong's trial. So Kaitlin Cash was the poor soul. who ended up finding her friend dead that day. She said on the first day of the trial that she was the person who made the 911 call, and she'd found Mo at that point unconscious in her apartment. That was actually played for the jurors. There was also body cam footage from police officers arriving at the scene. Kaitlin Cash actually desperately tried to save Mo's life, and I cannot imagine the trauma that she has to relive. She did over 100 chest compressions on Mo, desperately trying to save her friend. Another witness, Nicole Mertz, that was the former friend of Kaitlin Armstrong, in fact, she told jurors that she asked Armstrong what she would do if Colin Strickland began dating someone else. Armstrong apparently responded, "I would kill her." Now, I am going to say, clearly, lots of us have said things like that. I've liquidized people in my head. I've set them on fire regularly in my head. I have a kill list. I just don't action it. Lots of us do. We say things we would never actually go through with. It is not out of context to say to somebody, "I'd kill them." Because in that moment, we're in a safe place. We know it's not real, but it expresses a deep moment and feeling that is culminating in that response. So I get it. But in light of what I've actually talked about today, it's very sinister that she said that. Then, of course, Colin Strickland, he took the stand on the 3rd of November. His testimony lasted 2 days. Apparently, he was quite uncomfortable and agitated in the courtroom. Why is that then, Strickland? Is it because you come across as a great big massive liar? Did you deny the very existence of Mo in your life? And were you cheating on your girlfriend? Yeah, you should be a bit uncomfortable. So he ends up explaining that he dated Armstrong on and off for about 2.5 years. He said he also had a really good friendship with Mo. Really? A really good friendship with Mo? I thought Mo didn't exist. I thought you said to the investigators you didn't know her? I mean, how do we go from "I don't know this person who's been killed" to "Oh, we were really good friends"? It's because you're a duplicitous cheater and liar. He also said that they never officially dated. They had like a brief fling in October 2021, but they felt that they were better being friends. He said that they met at a 3-day gravel race in Idaho, and that happened in September 2021. He did call Mo an immense talent, and he said that he'd actually helped her to connect with sponsors. Well, actually, what happened was she was an immense talent. That's why sponsors connected with her, because of her immense talent. But clearly, he's trying to ingratiate himself with the court in that moment, saying, "I'm not really a bad person who denied the very existence of this person I was intimate with and who actually I helped along the way. I want you to see me as somebody who helped her in her career." But we all know that's just trying to disguise the disgusting way he behaved in those initial interviews. The jury were actually shown quite a few texts between Colin Strickland and Mo. One of the examples was from the 10th of May 2022, so that's a day before the murder. And there were 3 messages that were sent from Mo to Colin saying, "Hey, are you back in Austin? I'm flying there to hang out with Kaitlin Cash for a few days before Gravel Locos." And then in subsequent messages, it's clear that Mo and Colin didn't go for a training ride. He actually went with another friend who was out in town. But it was mentioned that Armstrong joined for a part of the ride, but then left. At this point, Colin and Mo end up finalising their swimming plans for Deep Eddy Pool at 4:45 p.m. that day. Now, the prosecutors also showed earlier texts between Colin Strickland and Armstrong. So on the 28th of October 2021, the message from Armstrong reads, "I know you better than to show up at the meteor with that girl." Colin, at this point, confirmed in court that that girl referred to Mo. So the defence asked Colin Strickland about what his relationship was like with Armstrong, and he said she was never violent towards me. She was generally calm. She was generally mild. There was nothing that stood out that made him ultimately concerned for her personality-wise. When they looked at Armstrong's digital footprint, one of the things that became a big part of the trial was the phone activity. So, for example, the jury was shown images of Mo that Armstrong had literally viewed on Instagram, so she was obviously very interested in what Mo was doing, and they didn't have a relationship, so she's clearly concerned because of the relationship between Mo and Colin Strickland. Armstrong had also tracked Mo's Strava account on multiple instances, so she could see Mo's location, she could see her details. She's probably trying to figure out whether he was with her. Armstrong had also deleted a note that ended up getting recovered from her phone, and that contained the address 1704 Maple Avenue. That was then deleted on the 12th of May. That was the day after Mo had been murdered. On Google Maps, the address from the deleted note is the same location as the apartment that Mo was staying, despite the numbers actually being off. The actual residence is located at 1708 Maple Avenue, so she was clearly searching where she was staying. The prosecution also reviewed several documents with Austin Police Detective Richard Spittler. So Spittler was able to show several email accounts tied to Armstrong that were used to purchase things like flights, a prepaid visa, and a VPN. A VPN obviously means that people can't see your activity online. And Spittler was also able to show that on the 27th of May 2022, one of those accounts that he'd identified that was associated with Armstrong had searched for the name Kaitlin Armstrong. Now bear in mind at that time, Armstrong was in Costa Rica. So she's interested. She's interested in what people are saying about her, what the news is saying about her, whether people are onto her, and also, wow, doesn't it just speak of narcissism that she wants to be involved in the investigation to some degree? So records show that that account that was searched visited news articles, including one titled Moriah Wilson Murder, Colin Strickland in hiding until suspect Kaitlin Armstrong is found. Another search was, can IMEI be tracked if not making phone calls? On the 23rd of June 2022, there's multiple searches for, can pineapples burn your fingerprints? Just gonna throw it out there. I do question anybody who would believe that pineapples could burn your fingerprints. I'm just imagining there'd be a few chefs out there, a few people involved in the catering industry that probably wouldn't have fingers, you know? If every contact with a pineapple causes the erosion of a large area of your skin, enough to remove your fingerprints, well, most of us who've grown up to a certain age would be walking around without our hands because pineapple's delicious. Who hasn't ate pineapple with the fingers? The point is, she's looking for things to try to disguise herself further, but I'm just questioning that one. Can pineapples burn your fingerprints? Also, they bring into court the Jeep location. So 2 prosecution witnesses provided an analysis of Armstrong's Jeep info entertainment system, which was associated with her GPS. Detective Portnoy from Austin PD, he actually gave testimony spanning 2 days. He went over the track points of Armstrong's car on the 11th of May 2022. They actually converted that into an animation for the jury to just show the path of the vehicle. Portnoy said they were actually able to verify the timing of the data within 4 seconds based on comparison with the CCTV footage, so very compelling. So at 7:35 p.m, Armstrong's vehicle approached the I-35 before it turns onto MLK Jr. Boulevard. The vehicle then turns onto Cedar and Maple Avenue. Portnoy stated that the car stayed in that area for at least 1 hour and did several loops. So the animation shows this vehicle moving around 18th St. Maple and the back alley behind Kaitlin Cash's house where Mo was staying. Now by 8:37 p.m, the vehicle is in the alley, the only way to enter the garage apartment where Mo was staying with Kaitlin. At 8:40 p.m, the track point ended. So Portnoy said, once the car is turned off, track points end. So they said that the final point is a grassy parking area near Maple Avenue Alley, and they examined that new route after that starts at 9:17 p.m, obviously leaving. So that's incredibly incriminating that her vehicle has made those movements and was obviously not just in the vicinity, but directly next to the murder victim's home. Pamela Mazak also testified about the Jeep's GPS location. She showed the jury a PowerPoint presentation about the location of Mo's, Colin's and Armstrong's phones on the 11th of May 2022, along with data obtained from the Jeep's GPS. So again, she was very much able to show exactly where everyone was and the incriminating connection between Armstrong and Mo's death. Now, Costa Rica, because obviously she fled, so we have Emir Perez come in and give evidence, the US Marshal who was involved in the assisted search for Armstrong in Costa Rica. He obviously was a person who helped to capture her. He said the authorities did a lot of old-fashioned police work to find Armstrong, said that Santa Teresa was small, it only has one road, but it's very touristy, it's located on the beach with lots of hostels, and Perez said that Armstrong at that point was using 3 to 4 aliases. An interpreter was actually brought in as a witness and were able to translate messages that were sent between Alison Page and a plastic surgeon, Jorge Badilla. Page was thought to be one of Armstrong's aliases. That tied in with her email address that she created. And there were several messages that had been sent from Page asking how quickly she could be seen and also the cost of a rhinoplasty. A receipt was also shown for a cosmetic procedure for over $6,000. Prosecution also called Stephen Aston, who's a firearms and tool mark expert. Now, he was asked at length about his training and work, what he did and what his relationship with the case was. Aston said he was given 3 fired cartridges from the scene and 2 firearms. He said he was able to match Armstrong's Sig Sauer pistol to the cartridges and also to eliminate the gun belonging to Colin Strickland. Now, the defence, they questioned Aston about the actual science of his findings. They wanted to dispute what he was saying, discredit it. Aston did admit that the science was subjective. So the defence then called in Bill Tobin. He's a material expert who'd worked for the FBI. He'd actually been called as an expert witness in over 300 court cases. Now, Tobin said that the guidance firearms examiners like Aston use is problematic. He said there's no definitive answer for what qualifies as significant agreement when matching projectiles. Also said there are issues with firearms production, ability to tell whether cartridges from different weapons are actually from those different weapons. But you understand, as a defence, you want to bring in witnesses who are going to discredit whatever the prosecution have. So ultimately questioning the reliability is really powerful. Now, Tobin's testimony took hours, but I would say the prosecution did a very good job of sourcing and finding other scientists who totally disagreed and contradicted Tobin's testimony. So they were able to counter that. When it came down to the closing arguments, they took place on the 16th of November. Gonzalez for the prosecution said, if you look at all the evidence, look at it with common sense, logic, let the evidence take you where it's going. You're going to find that the evidence is right there, and pointed at Armstrong as saying that. The defence, of course, they said that Colin Strickland was an unreliable narrator in his testimony, said that Armstrong hadn't displayed any behaviour as a psycho killer, as if that's how you would know who somebody was. I mean, again, I think the defence had a really hard mountain to climb, but the idea of going, listen, she obviously didn't do it. She doesn't seem like one. She's like a psycho killer. Where's your evidence that she's a psycho killer? I mean, she's never been a psycho killer before. Well, I mean, I think the fact that she mercilessly executed a woman that she had no reason to kill, that would make her a psycho killer. Well, you can use that. You're buying into a definition that I'm suggesting is different to what I'm trying to project. I'm saying, is she actually a psycho killer? Yeah, she is. Has she killed anyone else? No, she's killed one person in cold blood. Yes, but does that make her a psycho killer? I think it just, I'm getting Fatal Attraction vibes from this woman. I'm just saying, when I think about a psycho killer, I think they're a bit more psycho. Can you just back out of the room, Mr. Defence? I think you've had a bad week. Because, of course, people aren't wandering around being psycho killers on the whole. That does not mean you cannot kill in a very psychopathic way. And when we're talking about this murder, that's absolutely what happened. The idea that people who have this propensity for killing are walking around just going, hey, I'm a psycho killer. Hey, I'm a psycho killer. Hey, I'm a psycho killer. That would be far easier. We'd just avoid them. No one would go near them. Therefore, you wouldn't get killed by them. The reality is, cold-blooded killers, they sleep behind a mask of acceptability, and then the monster comes forth in certain situations. I genuinely can't kind of compute how the defence were going for that. It's only circumstantial. It's only circumstantial. It's not though, is it? She was at the scene of the crime. Her car was recognised there. Her phone data connects to. Also, she went on the run. She tried to have her face changed, hair changed, body changed. She got totally new names. She used her sister's ID to escape America. And on top of that, when she was finally arrested, she tried to escape. She literally tried to escape. All of those are accurate suggestions to make, but they're all circumstantial. Well, yes, and the circumstance is she's a massive psycho killer. There you go. But at the end of the day, you've got to represent your client, and that's what they were doing. It will not surprise you at all to know that the verdict took 2 hours. 2 hours, and then came back and were like, guilty as hell. Apparently, the fact that she was a yoga instructor didn't actually mean that she got away with it. Although maybe when she heard that guilty verdict, she hoped that her body would just in a complete limber yogi kind of way just dissolve onto the floor and just shuffle its way under the door of the courtroom. That kind of thing I imagine she played out in her head. Now, of course, after this verdict was given, the family were given the opportunity to give victim impact statements, and we can understand that Mo's family are absolutely devastated. Also, Kaitlin Cash, she still lives in the house where Mo was murdered. She still every day sees the dent from the bullets where Mo was shot. And every time she does her laundry, that resonates with her. She actually describes the PTSD and panic attacks she has now. She says, I think about it every single day of my life. I'll never forget that moment in the bathroom, watching that sink turn red and then wanting to put it back on my hands because it was the only thing I had left of her. That broke my heart when I read that. It really did. The fact that she's washing the blood of a friend off in the sink, and that sudden realization, no, I want it. Because it's the last part of her friend that she'll ever touch again. The conflict of that memory, and also the emotional depth of that connection that's clear from that statement. Mo's brother, Matt, he also testified that he now struggled with depression. He said, my sister was my closest confidant, my only sibling, the only person in the world that I could talk to about my certain experiences. My sister had her life taken from her for no reason at all. And it's true, we're talking about a girl who was pissed off with another girl because her boyfriend was playing away with her. That's it. Now that's painful, it's hurtful. I see that person who is having somebody cheat on them as a victim, but the minute that you react with such deplorable, cold-blooded actions, I'm not surprised people would want to cheat on somebody like that, because that person has an ice heart. It's as simple as that. Mo's mother, Karen Wilson, she was really overcome with emotion. She told the court that her daughter was born during a lightning storm, and that's how she lived her life. She said that learning of Mo's death was literally the worst moment of her life. She said, I would have done anything to stand in the way of that bullet. When you love something that much, when it's taken from you, the depth of the joy of that love is equal to the depth of the pain you have to live in. When it came down to the sentence was a strict and strong one, and one I think that was absolutely correct. So she was actually sentenced to 90 years in prison. She was also at this point given a $10,000 fine, and rightly so. So she's never going to walk the streets again, I would imagine. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that she won't be up for parole at some point, but it does mean that it's unlikely she's going to get out. She was then transferred to Lucille Plains State Jail in Dayton, Texas. Her projected release date is actually given as March 2112. So that's a long way away. She actually isn't currently eligible for visitation, and she won't be legally allowed to apply for parole until 2052. Now, one of the things that's happened since she's been incarcerated is the Wilson family, so Mo's family, have launched a lawsuit, and I understand why. So June 2024, a Travis County judge ordered Armstrong to pay the Wilson family $15 million as a result of a wrongful death suit that filed in May. Now, I appreciate that Armstrong doesn't have $15 million, and often in these cases, it's more about just being clear. It's about putting a value on an incalculably important and immeasurably priceless human being, which is impossible, but they do it to just denote that that person's life had great meaning and worth. But in July 2024, the Wilsons actually filed another lawsuit, a second one. And the reason for this, and this is something that I said to you earlier on, that brings into question the family of Armstrong. It really does. I think there is something really malevolent going on here. Because Armstrong, this woman who was murdered in cold blood, Mo Wilson, she transferred most, if not all, of her assets to her mother and to her sister during the criminal and civil cases. And the reason for that is she wanted to avoid paying damages. She's killed this woman. She's totally ruined the lives of people who absolutely adored Mo, but she feels that that family should not be given damages even though she's caused that pain. Now, the lawsuit details how the deeds of 2 properties in Austin owned by Armstrong were transferred to her mother or sister and have since been sold. So they've taken that money. A 3rd property in Lockhart that was owned by Armstrong and Colin Strickland, Armstrong transferred the ownership to her sister, and that sister gave full ownership to Colin Strickland. Furthermore, it gets even worse. A Chase bank account in Armstrong's name, which contained $78,000, was drained to $10 just 3 days after the Wilsons filed their wrongful death lawsuit. So the Wilson family is absolutely understandably right now seeking over $1 million and has asked for a jury trial to determine the final amount. And absolutely they should. What does that say to you about Armstrong's family? I know this is coming across judgy, but good. Mo was executed by a jealous woman who wanted to escape justice. And even when she faced justice, knew that there would likely be some kind of financial reality to that, and went out of their way to deny the victim's family any money. That's disgusting. And to be in that family and to be okay with those kind of actions is harrowing as far as I'm concerned. And I say that about Colin Strickland as well, because he's allowed that house to be put in his name, which basically means, again, that he's benefited and he's denied Mo's family from getting any money. Now, Mo Wilson's family's lawyer, Randy Howery, said the family is not interested in getting a bunch of money. What they're interested in is making sure that Kaitlin Armstrong doesn't financially benefit, nor does her family financially benefit because of the actions of Kaitlin Armstrong. So hopefully they will be successful, and I would suggest that that money would need to be returned to them because they deserve it. You won't be surprised to know as well that she launched an appeal. So the Court of Appeals in 2024 went ahead and denied her appeal for a new trial because she wanted to apparently introduce new evidence that had been previously unheard in her trial. But I guess they looked at actually what played out and went, yeah, she's guilty, let's not bother. It's no point spending any more public money on this one. Just, I don't know, throw away the key. Throw away the key. Let her use any name that she wants and let her defence lawyer talk about how circumstantial the case is, and we're just gonna go, no, it's very obvious that she did this and we'll see you later. So job done. Anybody want to go out for a cocktail? Anyway, what I'm saying is justice at least has prevailed and she hasn't been given any leave to have a retrial in this case, and rightly so. She's definitely guilty of murdering Mo, and Mo's family deserve justice and not more and more protracted things playing out where they can't get on with their grief. I absolutely hope, and I'm sure all of you listening hope, that Mo's family are given the money that Kaitlin Armstrong tried to hide. I hope they get that. I hope it gives them a sense of well-being to know that the outsmarting she thought she could do has failed, and that the authorities realised that, and that they are given that money, not to make up for the loss of Mo, that never will happen, but just so that they can feel at peace knowing that she won't benefit in the future. I hope you found this case interesting. My thoughts go out to Mo's family. What a ludicrous reason to murder a life with such potential. And what a heart of stone the individual pulling the trigger must truly have. See you again next time, guys. Look after yourselves. Be safe.